morning, everyone. My name is Megan. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Michael Donnelly. I'm an alcoholic. And before I begin, I want to thank, got to do this so Brian doesn't scoot up here. How's that, brother? Good. First person I want to thank is, of course, Judith. I think we should all do that one more time. What an amazing conference. The speakers, I want to thank them. How great have they been? They've been wonderful, right? And all. Cray, my host, has been tremendous. I've known Cray a long time. Him and Lexi and their beautiful boy. I mean, just great. He's just been wonderful. Dave, nice work up here. Excellent. After the Megan comment, he leans over to me and says, I just couldn't resist. I said, it's part of the problem, Dave. It's part of the problem. I have so many friends here today, friends that I've met through being up here in this area, and I want to thank you for your graciousness and your hospitality to me. The facility is great. The food's been great. Just catching me in the hallway and chatting with me. I have so many good friends from South Dakota and my local area come up and to be here for this conference, and it's just an extra special blessing for me to be here with them, and so thank you all for that. Most importantly, I want to thank people who aren't here, because of the people who I feel in my heart that I owe the deepest gratitude that aren't here. I wouldn't be here. A guy named Brian from the south side of Chicago who 12-stepped me, and Brian went to meetings, but Brian did more than that. Brian actually worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, so that when he engaged me in a hall and I was contemplating suicide, very passionately contemplating suicide because my life was in an absolute pit of hell, leaning up against a wall, wondering how I could kill myself without having my mom know it was suicide because that would have destroyed her. He came behind me and asked me a question that I'd been asked almost my whole life. And that's, Mike, are you okay? And every time I had a different answer than the one I gave Brian. Almost every time it was, yeah, I got this, no problem. Oh, you kind of see something here? Something's bad? No, I'm good, bad moment. Don't worry, guard back up, we're good. But this day I didn't do that. I really don't know why. I found out later why, and it had everything to do with someone else working step 11 that I gave Brian a different answer on that day. I didn't know it on that day. I didn't know it for 6 months, but it's true. I looked at Brian and I said, no, man, I'm not okay. I'm just not. And it was the first time in 24 years of my life that I said that out loud. It is not the first time in 24 years that I had said that. I had been saying that inside of myself from as far back as I can remember. Way before this guy ever put anything into his body to distract himself from his life or to try to feel fixed. I've been broken. I've been a mess, and I don't know why. My dad, absolutely my hero, one of the finest men that God has ever produced on this planet. Honorable, taught us dignity, taught us faith, taught us how to love your family and serve them. My mom, who sacrificed after my dad passed away when I was a little kid. You know, waiting tables in a local diner, picking up quarters and nickels on the side of the counter, make sure we stayed in a Catholic school to keep us out of the Chicago public school system, which was a mess back then. I mean, I've had tremendous examples around me all the time. My mom would take us to church. My dad would take us to church. We would talk about prayer. I would see them pray. Before meals, we would say grace. Like prayer wasn't something that was out of my life. When my dad was dying, I was 6 years old. I was just turned 6. My sister was 8. My dad was dying. He had gone to work. He was 42 years old, lieutenant in the Chicago Police Department. And he had an aneurysm break in his bowel. And it was just a matter of time. And we had this candle in our living room. And my mom would say, pray for God's will, pray for God's will, pray for God's will. What a strong lesson to teach a little kid, right? She wasn't trying to candy coat life to me like she loved me enough to tell me the truth. This was really bad, you know. Who knows what God could do, but it's really bad. So she wasn't setting my expectations super high with lollipop prayers, and she wasn't keeping me in the dungeon away from him. She was putting me right in the middle. God, whatever you want, have this bless you. That's where I come from, right? And that coming from that, I still ended up in this hallway contemplating how to get off of this rock without her knowing. Walked past me as a 12-step and working member of Alcoholics Anonymous, who he and I are very still good friends today. I would call him one of my best friends. He took me to this meeting, and I hated it. It was the Lamont Oaks group on the south side of Chicago. And they all sat in red chairs. They had a newcomers meeting before the regularly scheduled AA meeting. There was about 60 to 70 new people there, and new people there was defined as anyone with a year or less. And after that newcomers meeting, then you took your chair and you went into the regularly scheduled AA meeting. And there was somewhere between, 200 and 250 regular members that were there. And the reason that they brought the newcomers, made the newcomers bring in the red chairs, was so that the old-timers could see that the newcomers were in red chairs and they could go up to them and approach them, right? They could go up to them and say, do you have any phone numbers? Do you have a big book? Do you have a sponsor? They weren't waiting for the new crowd to flood to the old crowd. The old crowd was reaching out to the new crowd. Glass of water, brother. And I wouldn't go to the regular meeting. I went to the newcomers meeting, and I thought, these people are crazy. I'm getting out of here. I've heard about this, and thanks, brother. And it's just not me. And I left, and I'm not sure I drew a sober breath for about 6 weeks. I was trying to drink you out of my mind, and I couldn't do it. And on August 27th of 1991, I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous, please God to stay. And I found something here that when I showed up at the second meeting that I didn't find at the first meeting. And that was I connected to your stories. When you talked about how broken you were on the inside, that's what grabbed me. Like, we all had different things. Like, you guys talked about how you'd been to prison. I had never been to prison. I can't relate to that. I've been to jail. Very different. I heard how many divorces you had. I had never been divorced. Granted, I couldn't get anybody to marry me because I was a maggot, but that's not the point. That is not the point. Right? I mean, I had all these differences in my head. Right? Semantics. I couldn't listen with my heart. Right? I couldn't hear what you were saying to me on that first meeting, but I heard it at the second one. Right? And again, as a direct result of step 11, someone in their life working step 11 that I didn't even know they were working at that time. And this whole thing just kind of happened. All of a sudden, I just loved you, like out of nowhere. Like, I'm just being honest with you. Like, you didn't have to, once the second meeting hit, and I, even though I didn't get your message, I didn't understand what you were saying, I connected with you and I was in. Like, I'm in. And I'm still like embarrassed that I'm in. I am. I'm very embarrassed that I'm in. I can't believe my life has gotten so bad that I got to hang out with you. But I'm loving what you're saying, you know? I'm loving what you're saying. A few months go by, and I get transferred to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I meet this guy, Joe Friday. He became my first sponsor. And we're sitting in a cafe called the Crack Pot on Minnesota Avenue. It's now famous Dave's. Yeah. And I love that. Crack Pot, right? Joe Friday. It was just nuts. Couldn't write this stuff, really. And Joe is sitting across the table from me, and we're trying to figure out whether or not he's going to sponsor me. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you my story, you tell me yours. At the end of that, we can do the deal, we'll do the deal. I said, good. So he tells me this story, and like, it was tight, I think. I really didn't hear much because I was sort of writing my own as he was talking. And so I just opened my mouth and started just having words come out. I don't know if you guys have ever had that experience where you're like you're as shocked as the listener at the lies coming out of your mouth. Like, no thought process, just bloviation, just nothing. And Joe kind of cuts me off. And he says, kid, you have no idea what alcoholism is, do you? And I was like, well, yeah, it's when you're drunk a lot. And he said something that absolutely just directed me in a very different vein of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, alcoholism and drunkenness have almost nothing in common together. And I was like, what? He said, oh yeah. Drunkenness is the end result of the allergy that takes place when you have alcoholism and you drink alcohol. But alcoholism is not its symptoms. And I was like, I didn't really understand what he was saying. And he said, look, alcoholism, according to the big book, and we started opening it up, and we started going page by page through it. And we got into the doctor's opinion. We started talking about this allergy to alcohol. This idea that Silkworth saw in his patients. And after thinking about them and praying about them, because he was a pretty spiritual guy himself, somehow, some way in this mind of his, he came up with this idea observationally that perhaps it seemed to him that when these certain types of folks like myself, when they digest alcohol, something happens to them that's beyond their mental and physical control to stop. And that was me. I didn't want it to be me. I swear to God, I was hoping it wasn't me, but it was me. And how did I figure out it was me? He started asking me questions about my drinking. Did you ever go out and you didn't want to get drunk and you ended up insanely drunk? And I was like, I think twice, almost every time. Like the last 6 or 8 months of my life were absolute hell, and that pattern had been repeated over and 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 over. The last, 6, 8 months, maybe a year, I don't really know right now in this moment, but the last portion of my drinking was just horrible. Like it was horrible. I hurt every single person who loved me in my life. I took every vestige of the morality my dad tried to teach me. My mom lived right out in front of me, and I flushed it. At every turn, at every angle. If you were in my life, I was hurting you. It was a question of when, not if, I was going to hurt you. And I didn't want to be that guy, but I was that guy. So he continues on. He talks about this allergy, and he's like, Mike, do you have an allergy to alcohol? After a few talks and getting to that point, and I said, yeah. And he says, well, there's another part, and it's this mind that lies to you. And he went back to the doctor's opinion. We have an inability to differentiate the true from the false. And again, that absolutely landed on me. Because I don't know about your wolves, but mine come to me disguised as sheep. Alcohol never said to me, Mike, if you drink tonight, you're going to destroy your family. Didn't say that. Mike, if you drink tonight, you're going to spend all your money. Mike, if you drink tonight, you're going to say horrible things to people you love. It never said that. You know what it said to me? What, are you never going to go out again? Seriously? Okay, you're 24 years old. Like, this is what 24-year-olds do, and you're never going to do this again? Like, good luck having a life. Why don't you do this? Why don't you go out and just have 2? Why don't you just get a bottle and just nurse the bottle all night? Like, stand there holding the bottle of beer at the bar with your friends and just don't drink it as fast as they do. And I was like, that's brilliant. I never recognized that, I'm having this conversation with what seemingly is a third party, okay? Because they're talking in third-party pronouns, and I'm answering them in first-party pronouns. Never came to me as the wolf it actually is. Not once. Not once. And he said, do you have that? And I said, yeah. He said, so let me get this straight. You have an allergy, by your own admission. I said, yeah. He said, you have a mind that lies to you, by your own admission. I said, yeah. He said, well, the good news is it sounds to me like you're probably have alcoholism. The bad news is Alcoholics Anonymous offers no solution for either one of those. We are not doctors. We cannot fix your body. If you have the allergy, you will have it till the day you die, pal. And we are not therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, contrary to popular belief. We are not. So we can't fix your brain. We're not here to do that. And I asked a question that I don't even know where it came from, probably God or something inside of me, maybe my dad intervening at some point. And I said, well, then what do you offer? And he said, a solution for the third part. And the miracle is when you get the third part right, God takes care of part 1 and 2. Your job in AA, Mike, is to take care of part 3. And I said, what's that? Well, shouldn't have said that, but I'm glad I did. The old Mike didn't want me to ask it. It still came out. The new Mike is really glad that I asked that. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's your broken soul. The only thing we work on in Alcoholics Anonymous is getting us to a place where we have a spiritual awakening as the result of the first 11 steps. And when you have that awakening, your life will radically change. I can't promise you wealth. I can't promise you thinness. I can't promise you a lot of things. That was not a joke, by the way, and I'm hurt. I'm hurt deeply. But what we can promise you, if you do the work, an awakening that will radically change the way you look at life, the way you look at people, the way you look at yourself, and maybe most importantly of all, God and his universe. That man did not break his promise to me. This book has not broken its promise to me. And for the men I've sponsored over the years, those who have done it, it has not broken its promise to them either. Which means, ironically, that the people who didn't do the work, it didn't break the promise to them either. I do the work and I get the result, or I don't do the work and I don't get the result. That's it. That's the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, with love and kindness, but that's the message. So we started out on this journey, right? And he said, tell me about God. Well, I was raised in the church. Like I said, my mom kind of took us everywhere, sent us to school, made sure we heard all the things that she wanted us to hear about God. I was very grateful for those. But it just didn't seem like it made sense to me. It didn't seem like it fit. And so I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, what do you think of God? Like, seriously. I didn't know he was asking me questions very similar to page 47 in the big book at that time. It was conversational. It was just conversational. And I said, well, he must be big and he must be nice. He said, why do you think he's big? And I said, well, 24, scratching the head. I said, well, look, when I go outside, like, I can see all kinds of stuff. And if it's true that he made all this stuff that I can see, then he must be bigger than all the stuff that I can see. He said, why do you think he's nice? And I kind of got a little choked, which I never did in those days. But I said, he must be nice because of this. I just kind of know I don't deserve a second chance, and somewhere inside of me I feel like he's given me one. He said, that's pretty good theology, kid. I said, yeah, I know. Sorry. I've been to meetings now for 6 weeks. I know exactly when I'm on my way. And he said, that's good enough. We'll come back to all the rest of that. But just this is where we'll start. And again, I didn't know he was quoting the book to me. Almost everywhere in the book, when it says, choose your own conception of God. It says at the start, at the beginning, when we commenced, this is when we do it. All right? But he looked at me and he said, if that's your concept 4 years from now, I guess that's okay. But I hope these steps broaden your concept. Make it more whole, make it more complete, make it more full over time. And I hope 10 years from now and 15 years from now, God, please, you're with us still, 25 years from now, that it just keeps expanding the longer you're with us. And I was like, yeah, okay. More coffee? I was not connecting to that part. I didn't get where he was going on that. I hadn't done any of the steps yet. We're just having conversations. To me, steps 1 and 2 are conclusions that I draw based on my own experience. Do I have an allergy? I look at my drinking and I ask myself, would that answer the question as to why I didn't want to get drunk and I ended up drunk? Yeah, it answered it for me. Do I have a mind that lies to me? Yes. Do I have a broken soul? Like I said, I got to tell you, long before I ever took a drink, something was smashed within me. Smashed. I always felt separate from you and separate from the universe and separate from God. Yes. And then I'd look at you and I'd hear your stories about how you felt connected. But you also told me how distant you felt at one point. So I had to guess. I had to make a leap that whatever helped you might possibly help me without me knowing it would. Just a guess, an educated guess, because of all the faces sitting at all the tables in places like this who said yes. He said, Mike, are you willing to turn your will and your life over to that power? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, can we do this? Can we just say this? That we'll say the third step prayer together, and then we'll work the rest of the steps, and we can come back to all the depth of the third step and not bloviate that right now. I said, yeah. So I made a commitment that I would say the prayer with Joe and I would do the rest of the work. That through the process, that commitment wavered a little bit when we got into the details of what it might mean. I agree with you there. But I still did it. I did it not passionately and openly and with a big bullhorn charging forward. I did it with concern and worry. It was a fearful process for me, but I did it, and it worked. So we got on our knees. We said the third step prayer. We got up. He handed me a piece of paper and a pen, and he wrote down. He said, I want you to write down your resentments, your fears, and your sex conduct. And it was a longer conversation than that, as you can imagine. But we went through it. Funny thing was, he didn't stop there. He said, there's prayers for resentments. I want you to say those prayers. And as Don articulated, those prayers were not about other people. They were about me. God, save me from being angry, as if I'm the chief victim of my own anger. That's kind of weird, because I never looked at that before. Fear. Matching calamity with serenity. Right? God, take away my fear. At once we began to outgrow fear. At once. And then sex. Right? I thought that was about conquest. It's not. It's about being an ass. Right? I didn't know that. Joe was pretty clear about what that inventory part meant. That there were 3 parts to it. There was a writing part, a thinking part, and a praying part. And in our book, sure enough, there's prayers on sex. Right ideal, right? Strength to do the right thing, guidance in questionable situations, and for sanity. There is such a thing as sexual sanity. You got to be kidding me. Nope. Bill Wilson never asked us to pray for something that doesn't exist. And if he does, why would you ever trust the book? Why would you ever trust the people who sponsor you? He never asked us to pray for something that doesn't exist. So I moved off into 5. He pointed me to this priest, and we sat down because he knew I was Catholic, and we talked for 6 hours about what I'd written down. And we invited God in. That was kind of a prayer. 6 and 7 certainly to me are prayers. We get to the bottom of page 75 and we ask ourselves these questions, right? Are the stones properly in place? We try to make mortar without sand. We're meditating on that. We're thinking about that. Look, I had no idea that these first 9 steps were training me for step 11. I had no clue that was happening. I was just on this journey, man. I'm just on this path. I'm just walking, right? The whole time I'm getting trained on how to do 10 and 11. Didn't know that. Then making amends, right? I remember being outside of places I owed an amends to, and I'd be sitting in the car, please God, I don't know how I'm going to go in there. I don't know how I'm going to go in there. I don't know how I'm going to go in there. And then I'm walking out going, thank you. I had no idea I was being trained for step 11, right? And there's so many great amends stories. There's so many things out there that we hear from the fellowship about these absolutely phenomenal, crazy situations that can never be made right. And somehow the grace of God showed up 15 minutes before that member walked in to make that amend. Maybe just soften the receiver's heart for 5 minutes. It's all God needs is a blink. Give him the chance. That's all he needs is a blink. Blink at time. That's all he needs. And I'd like to share a couple of them with you if it's all right from my perspective. The first one is my mom. I've been doing this deal now for a few months, and I really felt bad because I didn't know how to make amends to my mom. We didn't talk, we didn't hug, we didn't do anything. And Joe says, I want you to go home when you go home at Thanksgiving, and I want you to hug your mom. And I said, well, Joe, my mom and I don't hug each other. He goes, I'm not talking to your mom. He said, I want you to go home, and I want you to hug your mom. I don't care if she hugs you back. I don't sponsor her. I sponsor you. Go home and hug your mom. And it had been such a long time since my mom and I actually had physical contact with each other that when I hugged my mom, she just kind of froze up a little bit. Right? How sad. She gave me life, and she doesn't know how to hug me. See, I thought I had a drinking problem. I didn't. I had a broken soul. And that infected the relationship I had with my mom. And although I knew the relationship with my mom wasn't where it should be, I blamed my mom, not the infection. All right? He said, when you go home at Christmas, I want you to do the same thing. And because we're Irish, I went home at St. Patrick's Day. We're genetically incapable of not having a party on St. Patrick's Day, by the way. That's just part of the deal. So I go home, and I can bring you to the spot. In the hallway, in my mom's house where I grew up, there's a T hallway. And right smack dab in the middle of the T, when I was home for St. Patrick's Day, March of 1992, it was the first time in I don't know how long my mom's arms came up behind my back as I was hugging her, and she squeezed me. And I came here to not drink. I was way underselling this thing. I was beginning to get an idea that maybe I was. And she leaned over and she whispered in my ear, "That's the last hug I've had since Christmas." How sad, right? I mean, I come to a meeting and all of you are hugging me, right? We hug people who don't bathe. We hug people who, no, we do, don't we? I mean, we do, right? You know, every now and then you're like, dodge the headlights. All right, hey. Like, I get it, right? No, I'm not mocking anybody. I get it. I'm just saying, right? Here's my saintly ma who hasn't had a hug since Christmas. So Joe said, I want you to start calling your mom every weekend, and I did that. And you ask her 2 questions. First one, how was your week? Second one, wow, that sounds interesting. Tell me more about that. He goes, but early on, like, she's not happy that you're calling because she still thinks you want to steal money out of her purse. She still thinks you're looking for a loan, and she still thinks all the things that she has every right to believe you still are because you haven't shown her you're not. Why wouldn't she think you are? So he was right. The first call was like, hey, Ma, how was your week? Fine. Wow, that sounds interesting. Could you tell me more about that? I mean, I don't know how do you even follow up there? I don't know. But you know, over time, her answers got longer. And that was stunning to me. You know, Roberta takes me to work, and last Tuesday we went to lunch, and Kitty across the street brought me to church, and Cleo the dog needs to go to the vet. And just hearing Pat yesterday talk about his ma, you know, it's beautiful. But what's weirder about that whole thing isn't that my mom's answers got longer. Like, you would expect that from a good mother, right? Here's what's crazy. A bad son began to care about the answers. And the calls began to start differently. Instead of, hey, Ma, how was your week? They'd be like, hey, Ma, last week you said you were going to lunch with Kitty. How'd that go? Oh, before my eyes, I became a son to my mother. And I came here to quit drinking. Guys, I way oversold this. I way undersold this thing. I wasn't even close to what you were offering me. I wasn't even close. I had this guy that I lied to in business. Oh, you too? Okay, good. Finally, I can identify. That's great. 27 years in AA. Finally found the one guy who lied to a business partner. All right. It's very rare. And anyways. But I'm in a sales contest, right? And me being in a sales contest means I have to either kill the other participants to win or just lie. One of the two. So I opted for lying this time, and less jail time. And I go to this customer and I say, hey, you need to buy this contract. Here's the deal, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh, okay. And he signs it and he goes on. Coming around, gets on my A step. Didn't have to buy that. I was in a sales contest based on the average sales, so I kept adding things to this guy's contract because I knew he was a guy that probably wouldn't look who trusted me, and it would raise my average. And so I have to go to this guy and tell him. So I'm talking to my sponsor. I said, hey, here's the deal. He said, well, the first thing you got to do is go to your boss. And I'm like, my boss? He's like, well, yeah, you falsified contracts for the company, right? And you represented them and you lied on their behalf. So you need to tell her that. And then you have to go make amends to your customers. So you have 2 amends in that. I was like, I've been looking for a new sponsor. Did I tell you that? I'm just not relating anymore. So I called my boss and I said, here's what I did. And she says, well, can you tell him at renewal that the terms have changed and he doesn't need to buy that anymore? And I thought, well, I could. But you know what? I'm not gonna. And she's like, no, I'm giving you an out here. Like, you know, I mean, I said, yeah, I know, but I can't do that. And she said, if he calls here and he starts complaining about you, I'm just going to tell him you and I never had this conversation. This is all on you. And I was like, deal. Okay. Which I couldn't believe that was me, right? Like, I saw a different me in that moment, right? And it wasn't pretend. It wasn't for show. It was like me on the inside was different. And I went out and made amends to this guy, and I'm sitting in his office, and I never cried. Like, I just I was just a statue. I just couldn't cry. I don't really know why, but I just couldn't. And of course, God's timing is perfect. So I'm in my customer's office, and that's when he decides that I should cry. Right? It's like, jeez. So he says, "What? Are you okay? You look a little, you all right?" Or I said, "No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Just give me." And he says, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I want to tell you I stole from you." And he goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I stole from you." I said, "Last year at the contract time, I falsified some documents and I owe you $750 and I don't have it." I said, "I have $250 today, which I'm gladly going to give you, and 6 weeks I get a commission check for the other 5 and I'll bring it back. And we'll be square, but I just wanted to come out and tell you that and say I'm sorry." And he just kind of looks at me. He's like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "Well, I stole $750 from you in a contract." He's like, No, I heard that. And I know that's why you're here. But why are you telling me this? Like, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to make this right? And just the floodgates. I said, "Joe, I've hurt everybody. I've lied to everybody. I've cheated everybody. I've been a con and a fraud, always trying to be more important than I am, always trying to show some image to just put it out there." And he's like, "Oh." He's like, "Can I tell you a story?" And I was like, "Sure, that's good." Give me a minute, though. Give me a minute. So sure enough, he tells me this story. And when him and his little brother would go pick peas, when they were kids, and they would fill up baskets, and when they filled up this basket to a line, they got a quarter. And if they didn't fill the basket up to the line, they didn't get the quarter. So he said, when you started picking, man, you just sort of almost went unconscious. Like you didn't really, you sort of mentally started, but then after a while, you just sort of lost it. You just got blackballed in your head, and you just kept going. It was like secondary nature, just kept going. He said, so I'm picking peas one day, and there's only a couple of rules. One is you had to stay in the row that the farmer assigned to you. And then there was a couple of bells that rang. One is when there was 15 minutes left to pick. And then the third bell meant get on the pickup truck because it's a long walk back to the farmhouse if you're not on the pickup truck. So he's out there, he's picking one day, he says, and out in the horizon he sees this gully and train tracks are running through the farm field. And he sees this guy jump off the train and kind of roll, and he's got a big Texas hat on, one of these big cowboy hats. He says, so I'm picking, and he says, out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy picking peas, putting them in his hat, and he's in my row. And suddenly, Mikey says, I can't get my mind off this guy picking peas in my row. And I'm trying to stay focused on doing what I'm doing so I can fill this basket up and get my quarter, but I can't get my mind off of him. He says, and then the first bell rings. So I got to start heading back to the road because get back to the farmhouse in the pickup truck. He says, and I get a few feet down the road or whatever, and I hear, hey, kid. I turn around, and sure enough, it's this hobo, this guy who jumped off the train. And he comes walking up to me, and he takes his hat, and he dumps it in my basket. He filled it up, and to the line, I got my quarter. And this old boy pokes me in the chest. He says, remember that, kid? I gave you a hat full of peas. He says, and someday, someone's going to come knocking on your door, and they're going to need a hat full of peas, and you better give them one because somebody gave you one once. You know what I mean, Mike? And I was like, no, I have no idea. Peas? He said, Mike, I don't want your money. You can drop checks off here all you want. I'm never cashing them. He said, the honesty in your eye right now is worth more than the payback. And I said, no, I said all the things we're trained to say he wouldn't do it. Matter of fact, he went on to say, by the way, if you're ever looking for a job, we could use, ready for this? We could use an honest guy like you around here. Wait, I'm the thief. I'm the self-admitted thief. He says, we could use an honest guy like you around here. He said, if you don't want to be in our business, that's fine. He said, if you ever need a letter of recommendation, he said, I want you to call me. And I'll have my secretary write it up. I'll go out and sign it. You can just pick it up at the front desk. I don't want your money. I'm blown away. And he gets up from behind his desk. I'm a big guy. He was a big guy. And he comes around and he goes, I'm sitting in this chair and he goes, And I stand up and this guy hugs me. Right? And like, this isn't supposed to happen. Right? This is not supposed to happen. He's supposed to call my boss. She's supposed to deny we talked together. She's supposed to write me up. I'm supposed to lose my job. It's a small, relatively small community in Sioux Falls. He's fairly significant businessman in the community, and he's supposed to tell every business owner in that town that I am unhireable, untrustworthy, and a scumbag. And then I have to leave that town with my tail between my legs to go find a job somewhere else. Anybody agree with that end of this? Like, that's the fiction written in my head. Because that's my world, right? We forgot something. We moved. By the time we're getting close to 10, we're moving into a different world. The 10th step says we've become to live in the world of the Spirit. This is God's world. Those are different results. When we live in God's world, we get the same situations that occur in regular Mike Donnelly life. But they have totally different results when we're in God's world and not Mike Donnelly's world. Totally. And so I'm standing there hugging this guy, and I only have two thoughts in my head. One, you just absolutely walked down on a $750 debt. Do not get snot on this guy's tie. He's going to retract this. And the second thought in my head was, I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe this is happening to me. I'm beginning to feel through the beautiful graces of step 9 and the prayers that are coming along with it and the teaching me of how to meditate as I'm going through it with the stories that you were telling me when I first came in. I'm becoming one of you, and I don't even know it. And that was like one of the first glances that I got that I was becoming one of you. It wasn't just that I identified anymore, right? It was bigger than that. It was really bigger than that. There are a ton of other amends that I could tell you about. Women I've hurt, lies I've told. To me, look, there's a great line in the 4th step, right? Maybe it's a 3rd step, depending on who you are and how you study your book, right? But it talks about the personal house cleaning. And I would read that phrase, and I read that phrase for years, and I heard personal inventory. It says personal house cleaning. I got to tell you, I've been married for over 20 years. My wife is amazing. Many of you know her. She's a lovely, lovely lady. Why she picked me, I don't know. But the point is, every Saturday we clean, unless I'm here doing something else in AA. But every Saturday we clean. I cannot walk around the house with a piece of paper and a pen and write down all the things that need to be cleaned and hand it to my wife and go, here, honey, we're done. No. We might make a list of chores that need to be done, but then we have to go do them. The 4th step is not the holy grail of the steps. It's the list that tells us what we need to fix in our life to receive the Holy Grail, right? And so I'm going through these amends, I'm doing this stuff, and Joe starts moving me into, by this time Joe had moved away, and I got another young man named Mark. Mark changed my life in many, many ways, and it was perfect timing. It was just perfect timing, right? Mark began to talk to me about daily program and how to stay out of the messes. And how Alcoholics Anonymous stops at some point, not stops, but it moves, it's liquid, it's dynamic, it's not so structured and mechanical that you can't move in it. It's fluid in that sense, right? And he began to talk to me about how AA fluidly changes and morphs into problem solving, into problem prevention, right? Here's the great news of Alcoholics Anonymous. For me, I don't have to be a jackass anymore. Oh, I have great potential for jackassness. I just don't have to be one, right? If I'm doing the deal. Carly gave a beautiful talk on step 10 yesterday. And that's about living right now as best we can. When we see these things crop up, what do? Just what she said. When I see selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear in my life, I am called by that book to just ask God to take it away, to pray. Make amends quickly if I've harmed anyone. Discuss it with someone immediately if something's happened. And then the key to 10th step for me, resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Turn our thoughts, again, back to meditate. Meditate simply means to think about. To think about. Now that sounds like AA blasphemy to me, right? Because we're not supposed to think, right? Except what I found is the big book encourages that in step 11 all over the place. All over the place. Right? Upon awakening, we think about our day. Oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. No, I'm supposed to think about it. Now there's some promises that sort of help me, right? Some of them say in step 10 that I've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I can somehow trust this. I'm probably going to make mistakes, as the book talks about in 11, but if I'm doing this independently, there's a higher probability that I'm going to make those crazy mistakes. Here's the beautiful part. If I'm doing it with a sponsor or with a friend, or I'm bouncing those ideas that I'm getting about what God wants from me off of someone, probably have a much higher probability of living better, rather than these sometimes goofy thoughts that enter my head, right? It doesn't mean I won't have them. It means that if I live this thing still independently, there's a higher likelihood I'm going to act on them and it's going to be bad for the people I love. But if I can hold hands with someone and walk through that road day to day, there's a higher probability that even if they're there, I don't have to act on them. I am so thankful that the big book never says, if you still think crazy, you're a bad member of AA. I'm glad it doesn't say that. I really am. Because I think crazily. I've been sober for 27 years. I've been a step-working member of Alcoholics Anonymous for that long, with varying degrees of success and application. I can still have emotional days where I'm just up and down. I'm all over the place. I think people don't like me. I was really sure all of you were going to throw me out of here this morning. Like, there's all kinds of thoughts that run through our head. That doesn't define who we are as members of Alcoholics Anonymous outside of identification. I'm not going to stand before you and say that I practice step 11 so perfectly that I'm actually 5'4". I'm just levitating right now and you can't see it behind the podium. This is not true. To me, what step 11 is exactly what it says it is. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve conscious contact with God. Conscious contact. Improve. I don't know what that means, so I have to think about that. Now, the big book gives me an outline, right? Evening, morning, through the day, all that's wonderful and great, and I got nothing against that. I think it's beautiful and perfect. And the idea of me setting up my day and knowing the things that are priority to me, those have changed. They used to be work priorities. They used to be a list of items that I needed to accomplish in order to make sure at the end of the day I felt I was successful. That was fun. That was improvement. That improved it. But now it's different, right? Now it's more stuff like, hey, how do I make sure my wife knows she's loved? That's on the list. It wasn't on there a few years ago. It's on there now, right? How do I be a dad to my 2 boys? Right? How do I be a grandpa to Grace, to Hank, to Rose? You have commitments with the menu sponsor. Are you going to be there? I mean, it's funny how the list changes. It changes. Changed for me anyways. And at night, just looking back. Boy, you could have done that better. Dear God, help me do that better next time. Not battering ram with whips and chains. Let someone else be the flogged. I'm not going to be. Right? Why didn't you do this? Why'd you speak to someone that rudely? Why did you think that of that person? God, help me not do that anymore. Hey, man, I'm sorry about doing that. That's all it is, right? Once the house is clean, there's a lot less work to do to maintain how clean the house is, right? But if the house isn't clean, right, and I'm walking through all the mess, making excuses for all the mess, step 11 doesn't work all that well. At least it didn't for me. Now, I got to say something too. I think every prayer counts. We sometimes mock foxhole prayers in Alcoholics. Well, you know the foxhole prayer. Thank God for foxhole prayers, right? Thank God for the God who dives in the foxhole with us so he can hear us whisper it, right? Because we're afraid someone might hear us, you know? Like, I think all of those count. I think he's just leaning at us. Please, I'm waiting for you to say something. I want to hear you. Like, that's who I think God is today. Just waiting for us. Just waiting. And I don't think there's a bad prayer. I I know there's directions in the book. I know there's talk of like never pray for yourself and stuff like that. But I got to be honest with you. There's been times where I have been bankrupt at some level in my life. And the only thing I know how to do is pray for me. Did he answer those prayers perfectly the way I wanted them to? No. But the point is, he's my dad. I made a commitment in step 3 that he would be my father, my director, and my principal. Where else am I going to go? Where else am I going to go? When I need something, somehow you show up and we have a conversation. Right? And if you've been in AA just a couple of days, like our young lady last night, or the young lady that handed her the big book with 42 or 3 years, we've all had that moment already where we're like, I'm alone, it's never going to work out. It's, oh God, please, this, oh my God prayer, right? Please. And 2 days later, how bad was it? Somehow, without us even knowing it, God worked it out. It's okay to start there. I'll tell you where I started my journey of prayer was at that meeting at Lamont Oaks when we said the Serenity Prayer before the meeting, because I hadn't prayed in years before that. I didn't know you were training me. And then when the meeting ended, even though I didn't hear anything you said, we said the Our Father together. That meeting was so drenched in fellowship and activities for new people that it had this old-timer versus newcomer softball game. And so I had my class of 1991 jersey on, and all the rest of the newbies on my side of the field had that same jersey on. And the other side of the field had class of 78 and class of 90 and class of 87 and class of 76. They were all on the other side. There's hundreds of people there. And at the end of that softball game, we all made a circle around the field, very much like what you saw last night. I was moved. Wasn't that last night beautiful? That countdown beautiful last night? That was amazing. And we're standing there holding hands, and this guy named Frank, he's an attorney out of Chicago. He starts, he goes, Our Father, right? And then all of us, and we're all standing there holding hands, and I got Our Father, and I couldn't go any further. Now I'm weeks sober. I'm like 3 weeks sober at this point. And I didn't know I'm in training for this. No idea. And I'm looking around this field. And all these people are holding hands. By the way, this is outdoors with cars driving by. Like people were watching them, okay? Weirdos, right? But I got Our Father and I couldn't say anything else. And I thought, who are these people? Who are these people? And there was another thought, and it was this. This is exactly who you've always longed to be your whole life and never had the courage to be. And that second thought was right. I've always wanted to be a good person, whatever that means. Someone who was connected. Someone who wasn't ashamed. Someone who could just need something like God and not be worried that others would think it was weak or false or pretentious. I'm a broken guy. I'm still a broken guy. I am not less broken. I might be more healed, but I'm not less broken. And I go to meetings, and I love meetings, and I'm not arguing meetings or steps because there's no argument to me. They're two very, very different things. I go to meetings to hear the stories so I can connect. And when I connect, I keep coming back to find someone who's been enlightened by this thing, who's been lit up like this thing, who's found the awakening so that they can help me find one when I'm not at a meeting. I think Alcoholics Anonymous happens when I'm not at a meeting than it does no matter what I hear or what I say within a meeting. I think AA actually happens more authentically and beautifully in between the meetings when I'm living it right. Because that's where my life is. That's where my really gritty, dirty, ugly life is. You know? Amidst all that storm is Alcoholics Anonymous. Because in the midst of that storm, that's where this loving God who went and reached down into the gutter and yanked us up out of. I'm to improve that conscious contact. And again, I'm a visual guy. I'm trying to figure out what that might mean. I had a guy who I sponsor. He calls me on the phone because he knows I'm in a sales meeting. Anybody sponsor somebody like that? I'm going to be busy from 8 to 7 or 7 to 8. And then they call you at 7:15 because they know you're busy, right? It's beautiful. Hey, man, call me when you can. You know, 2 rings and you know you're shuttled off to voicemail like theirs, you know? Text back, hey, right? What are you doing tonight? I don't know. What are you thinking? So, well, why don't you come on over? We'll talk. Okay. Calls me after work. You sure you want to meet? Yeah, I'm good. I got some time. Come on over. Okay. Everything all right? Oh, yeah. Yeah. No worries, man. Just hanging out. All right, cool. Knocks on the door, right? Big eyes, like saucer eyes, you know. And we sit down, a little bit of small talk. How you doing, man? Good. What do you need? Let's get into this. Well, this thing happened, and it's over here. Here's the point. And it's over here, and it sort of slowly comes to the point. And he's crying on my couch in about 10 minutes. And I can feel it with him. And I almost choke myself. Because I remember what it felt like when I was in a situation similar to that, albeit different, still similar. And we said a prayer together. And we came up with a plan of action that he would do tomorrow, immediately, not 4 weeks, but the next day. And he got up and he hugged me and he said, thank you, and I love you. And I thanked him for coming over, and I love him too, and walked him to the door, and we hugged again, and he left. See, I didn't know it, but I was in training. I was in training to improve my conscious contact with God when I improved my conscious contact with my pigeon. See, what started out as, hey man, I know you're busy, turned into an embrace at my door. That improved my communication with him. It improved my intimacy with him as that process went on. Does everybody get that? And I think that's what we're doing in 11. I don't know. I'm not a guy who knows a lot of stuff. I'm a guy who thinks a lot of stuff, right? But I think that's how it works. The more intimate, and I got to trust him in order to get there. And that takes time. But the first 9 or 10 steps help me believe enough that he cares about me. When I give him these things that are eating my lunch and he gives me a path to go fix them, when I go fix them, I can begin to see that he's trustworthy. And I move from hope in what you're saying to a monochrome of belief to hopefully some faith in the results I get from these actions. And when I get those things, first of all, no one in this room or anywhere else can ever tell me Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work. Why? Because Joe said it in a coffee shop? No. Because I did it. And I know it works. And no one can ever talk me out of it. No one. People say, I'm worried about the future of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know why. I truly don't know why. There is nothing that grabbed me more than Joe's sincerity in his eyes. If you do these things, your life will change. And if we keep meeting each other like this and just coming to each other with love and sincerity in our hearts, telling them what God has done for us through these steps, someone's going to believe you. I love the 12th step, and I'm not bouncing into anybody else's business here. I'm just telling you. You know what it says? It says we tried to carry the message. It doesn't say we were good at it. It doesn't say anybody ever got sober. It doesn't say it. It's just we tried. We tried. I didn't know I was in training for step 11. Today's step 11 is a lot about how my day is. What am I going to do when I get up in the morning? What does God want from me? Who are the people that he's put in my life that I'm called to love? 5 years of marriage. Anybody been at the 5-year marriage crucial point? We're like, it's going to end somehow, either by death or by an attorney, but this is really like... And it wasn't my fault, of course. I think you all know that. And I used to pray. Please, God, don't let me get divorced. Please don't let me get... And I was sincere in that. And I have no idea how it happened. But one day the prayers changed. It stopped being, please help me not be divorced, to God, show me how I can love her in such a way so that she knows you exist. I promised him in step 3 that I was going to be something. He was going to be my father, my principal, and my director, and I was going to be his child and his agent. I failed at being an agent in my home for way too long. Way too long. And when I decided that he was God and I wasn't, and that he was the director and I was the agent, things got a hell of a lot better. I began to listen to her. She became my best friend right before my eyes. I can't tell you what the biggest mistake I made in every relationship that I had is I thought it was with 2 people. It's never with 2 people. It's always with 3. And when I keep the third one out of any relationship that I have, no matter what it is, friendship, marriage, parenting, grandparenting, friendships, right? Whatever it is, something's broken in it. My agenda is significantly supreme. And then my goal becomes to complete whatever that agenda is for that relationship as I define it. But when God comes into that, when he's the third part of that relationship, when it's a triangle, how ironic, when it's a triangle, instead of a straight line back and forth, I get fed from him, and when I get fed from him, I have enough. And I don't need to go to you to get fixed. I'm full. As a matter of fact, I'm so full that I got plenty to give you when you don't have enough. Instead of demanding that you give me what I need. It's one of the reasons my whole life was shattered apart. I kept grabbing things that I needed to get from God, thinking that people had them. People don't have them. I didn't know that. And if I would have just gone to meetings and had a sponsor, rather than listen to that sponsor, walk me through the big book, and go to meetings, I would have not known that today. I still would have not known that today. Conscious contact. You know, contact is a great word, right? There's a lot of maybe different definitions for it. We're doing this big book study, these workshops and stuff like that, and just going through it and study it and trying to understand it, trying to learn, getting ideas from people and listen to their experience. Contact is a touch. When I go to Dave, I put my hand on his shoulder, I'm making contact with Dave. To be consciously aware that contact is being made. That right now in this meeting, in our seats, we're being touched. That's the story of my life. The story of my life is that God was in hot pursuit of me, and I was not conscious of it. So I felt I had to go get fixed myself. But there's something about that awakening that I know I'm being touched. And I don't have to go get fixed. You know what I have to receive? I have to receive him as my fix. And that's very different than going to get fixed or finding something to fix me. I have to receive his presence as my fix. And man, I don't know about your day, but in the course of mine, with deadlines and vendors and customers and employees and family and all kinds, and myself, right? And the feeding of this body, like there's a lot of distractions that come in the way of receiving him. And so I have to keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. Right? As we get to the end of the chapter, it talks about, we said to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. That's a monolithic prayer. It means it's different than a mantra. It's different than a mantra, but it's just about being in that present moment with him who is, so that I can be filled, so that I can have enough to be prepared to give you what you need from him. And that's what Joe is doing. I talked about I wound up in Alcoholics Anonymous as a direct result of Step 11 from someone I didn't even know was doing it. And by the way, that person would never have called it Step 11, but that person was my mom. My mom had known something was wrong with the boy for a long time. Well aware. And we had this priest in our family. His name was Father Gavin. And when my dad passed away, Father Gavin came to our parish. He took me under his wing. Tremendous guy. Lived this thing tremendously without calling it this thing. We all have people in our lives who live this thing who don't call it this thing, right? She writes Gavin and she says, I have no idea what's going on with Mike. Like I just can't reach him. It's like he's untouchable. There's this wall. Like I don't know what to do for him. I love him so much and I'm trying to help him and I just can't. And I keep telling him to go to church and I keep telling him to read that Bible and I keep telling him about Jesus and I keep telling him, and just everything's bouncing off him. He doesn't want to hear any of that. She was right. I did not want to hear any of that. Gavin writes her back and he tells her the story of Augustine and Helen. Monica and Augustine. And Monica had the same problem with her kid Augustine. So she writes her family's leader. Says, I don't know what to do with Augustine. He's a maniac. Right? And he gives her he gives the advice to Monica that Father Gavin gave to my mom. And that was stop telling Michael about Jesus and start telling Jesus about Michael. I don't know how you got here, but I got here because someone prayed me here. My mom prayed me here. Maybe other people. You know, as the longer I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, I find people are all over the globe praying for us right now. My wife's at home praying for you. I don't know, which one is it? Which one prayer is going to be the one that knocks it over? Right? Like a pile of sand is on this side, and we're one speck of sand away. It's one more prayer. Boom, the wall comes down. Right? I don't know when that sand hits that side of the wall to knock the wall over. So I got to keep saying them. I got to keep praying. Over time, I have this book. It's a prayer list. It may work for you, may not. It's not in the big book, but it works for me. And there are people in this room who are on that prayer list because I love them. And I don't know which prayer is the next grain of sand that's going to knock the wall down that they need to have knocked down. I don't know. So I'm going to keep praying for them. Because there's people in this room that I love. You know what's weird? There's people in this room that I don't know that are on that list. New people in this room, you're on that list. Doesn't make me special, doesn't make me holy. It's my story. My mom prayed me sober. Maybe my prayer will help you be sober. Maybe not, don't know. But I don't want to go home and find out it could have and I didn't. These are all thinks, by the way. They're not knows, they're thinks. And I reserve the right to later know more and maybe refine it, okay? But this is what I've got so far. I know that step 11 changes lives. And this idea of knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out, it's a big debate. What's God's will? Who knows? Like, I have no idea why he put rings around Saturn. I have no idea why he gave this person so much intelligence and me a pea brain. Like, I don't know how he divides all that up, right? I don't know his economy of scale, right? So because I don't know and probably can't know, I'm not sure there's a lot of value in going so deep into that stuff that I can't probably figure out anyway. Maybe there is. Maybe that's what pushes you over that spot and the wall falls. I don't know. It just confused me. So I had to focus on something much more granular and earthy. Right? Like this one. What is God's will for your marriage? Uh-oh. I know. To get a better wife. I know. No. What is God's will for your wife, for your children, for your grandchildren? So Bill talks in the 12 and 12 about this this is a great thing, right? So we talk in our little runs around that we do in the big book, right? This idea that like all things that appear bad are really broken goods. It's really, really difficult in the spiritual realm to get something that's intrinsically evil. Almost everything that's bad or fallen or whatever is just broken goodness, including my brain then. Including my brain, probably. Again, these are thinks, probablys, right? So my imagination used to make me come up with all kinds of crazy ideas and I'd go drink. But I'm not the same guy. There's some things that have happened to me along the way. Bill talks about constructive imagination. How about that one? To sit down and to willfully think through what loving my wife might look like, if I thought that was part of God's will for me. How do I respond to her when she's having a bad day? If I don't have those ideas, I go to people that might. And I can talk to them. And I can seek them out and have a conversation with them. What do my adult sons need from me? Well, I don't know that